Our verse today is Acts chapter 5 verse 18. They arrested the apostles and put them in the public prison. At first glance, this verse may seem like a simple report of the apostles' arrest and imprisonment. Yet, when read prayerfully and in its fuller context, it reveals profound spiritual dynamics that remain urgently relevant today. The apostles were boldly preaching the risen Christ, healing the sick, and working signs and wonders among the people. See Acts chapter 5 from verses 12 to 16. Their ministry radiated divine power and truth, but instead of being welcomed, they were met with jealousy and opposition. The religious leaders, unsettled by the apostles' courage and growing influence, arrested them, not for any wrongdoing, but for proclaiming a truth that threatened entrenched power. This verse echoes powerfully in our time, as many Christians across the world suffer persecution, violence, and even martyrdom for their faith. In countries plagued by terrorism and religious extremism, believers are still being arrested, silenced, or killed, not because they wield weapons, but because they bear witness to Christ. The blood of Christians in Nigeria, in the Middle East, or in other parts of the world continues to flow, not unlike that of the apostles, because the gospel disrupts darkness. And even within the global church, we are reminded of the cost of faithfulness in leadership. The recent death of Pope Francis, a shepherd who courageously upheld the dignity of the poor, of the marginalized, and the suffering, invites us to reflect anew on Christian witness. While he was not martyred by violence, his papacy bore the weight of spiritual opposition and the complexity of guiding a wounded world towards the truth of Christ. Like the apostles, he too bore criticism for placing fidelity to the gospel above political convenience or popular approval. Acts chapter 5 verse 18 thus speaks into our moment with clarity. Obedience to God often brings us into direct conflict with the forces of fear, jealousy, and injustice. The apostles were publicly imprisoned and shamed for the truth that they carried. However, as the story shows in verse 19, their imprisonment became the stage for divine intervention. An angel liberated them and sent them back to continue their preaching, unafraid. This remains the pattern of God's work. The apparent defeat of his servants often becomes the beginning of greater witness. For the persecuted church today, for the grieving faithful mourning a beloved pope, and for Christians feeling silenced by cultural hostility, Acts chapter 5 verse 18, our verse today, reminds us that human chains never stop God's mission. Instead, it is often sharpened and clarified through suffering. In this light, we are left with a soul-searching question. What are we willing to risk for obedience to Christ? In a culture that prizes comfort, control, and reputation, the cost of discipleship may look like marginalization, public shame, or even death. Yet, we stand in the long line of witnesses who trusted that even real or metaphorical prisons are not the end, but the beginning of resurrection power.